The Birth Circle podcast features experts in all the nuanced areas of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum with the aim of helping women make the choices that will keep them safe, healthy, and empowered. We respect all birth choices and believe in supporting informed consent and evidence-based practices. Nothing said on this podcast should be taken as medical advice. You should always seek the advice of a competent professional for your care. Welcome to the Birth Circle podcast.
This is Sarah with Birth Circle, and today I'm so excited to have Dr. Janetti Marotta. And she's a psychologist who has specialized in infertility since 1990. So a lot of experience. And she's drawn from her own journey through infertility and for those with whom she's worked. And she's the author of A Fertile Path, Guiding the Journey with Mindfulness and Compassion. Dr. Marotta is also a longtime practitioner of meditation and a teacher of mindfulness, and an author of 50 Mindful Steps to Self-Esteem, Everyday Practices for Cultivating Self-Acceptance and Self-Compassion. So thank you for being with me today.
Thank you, Sarah, for the invitation. I'm really looking forward to this interview.
Yes, I'm excited. So we focus so much at Birth Circle about birth and especially postpartum. And I wanted to spend a lot of time with you talking about fertility, because fertility is part of the whole journey that we kind of forget. And it's, once you get that positive pregnancy test, then the world wants to hear about it. But a lot of times infertility is kind of still a hush-hush, and people come talk about it, but only in still pretty guarded ways. And so I'm excited to hear about your your take on infertility. And as a psychologist, what inspired you to specialize in fertility? In infertility.
And just one thing, it typically is talked about as infertility, but I like to call it fertility challenges.
Oh yeah,
because it's such a kind of a loaded word, and it's true. It's still hard for people to really talk about and be open about, which is why it's difficult to seek counseling.
Yeah.
So what inspired me to specialize in this area, which I have been specializing in for about almost 25 years now, is my own personal experience with infertility, with fertility challenges. So after 6 years of repeated miscarriage, IVF, donor IVF, first with my sister and then with the matched donor, adoption, it was finally surrogacy where we had a child. And she's now 26 years old.
Wow.
And the absolute continues to be the love of my life, along with my husband and I also have 2 children from a previous marriage. So for me, it was secondary infertility. And during those 6 years, I was really falling apart. My sense of self dwindled. And I sought all sorts of ways to kind of heal myself. And that was through therapy, individual therapy, family therapy. I joined a Buddhist Zendo. I had an acupuncture exorcism.
Wow.
I haven't heard that from anyone else.
No, I haven't heard that. Can I ask you, from a psychologist's point of view, why is it that fertility has the power to break us so severely? I mean, gosh, I didn't get the job I wanted. Gosh, I didn't get into the play I auditioned for. Gosh, like all these life challenges are, oh man, I went into bankruptcy. But fertility challenges.
Well, yeah, go ahead. Say infertility is easier.
It has the ability to completely break us as women.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
And why?
And that's what I found. And just one thing about secondary infertility, and it is that it's just as difficult as primary infertility for different reasons. I just want to put that out to not minimize the impact of it, but it has this. It's huge. I mean, and primarily, I think it has to do with the fact that the way we define ourselves as women is oftentimes embedded in motherhood. For men, it's virility, and it's the ability to procreate. And so we have this assumption that we're just going to be able to get pregnant and have a child, and when we want to. And when that assumption gets broken, our self-esteem gets impacted at this very primal level. So infertility isn't seen as a medical diagnosis, which it is, but it becomes a definition of oneself. So yeah, what happened to me was really no different than, at this point, the thousands of men and women that I've worked with over the years. And that is that you really get demolished. And what I was saying was, I tried everything, including like a lot of east-west paths. I went on vision quests, actually ended up being a vision quest, becoming a vision quest leader, seeking the wilderness for healing. And it wasn't until I got on this east-west path that I went to India, where its materialism is what's mainly at the basis of our culture, and spirituality is at the basis of India, where I really turned from the outside to the inside. And what I mean was that what was important was cultivating qualities of trust in myself, patience, self-acceptance. And when I turned that around, from the only way that I could be happy and feel fixed as a woman or as a human being was to have a baby. It was the success, the outward success, because I felt, and everybody who I work with mostly feels like a failure.
Yeah.
That then I was able to believe I would have a child if I opened to possibilities. It was going to happen. And actually, when I came back from that trip in India, I met my husband at the airport, and he met me with a pillow under his shirt, meaning that our surrogate had just gotten pregnant when I was in India. Yeah, yeah.
That is so beautiful. Very cool. So, what is mindfulness?
So, yeah, mindfulness, I mean, I see it as the perfect kind of way. I found mindfulness after, sometime after my having my daughter. And I realized that it was really the perfect kind of antidote to work with the twists and turns of infertility, because we tend to have a lens of judgment that inclines us towards looking at things as being good or bad. This is the success or failure that we could feel, or outward success or failure, like or dislike, and that's in terms of our experience or ourselves. And mindfulness is really about unconditional acceptance. It's being with what's happening without wishing that it was different. And so this is huge for infertility, because it's so much about, I can't wait to, to have a child. This is never going to happen. I'm a failure. I feel guilty because I should have tried sooner. So there's all sorts of ways where we get in our own way with how we're relating to the infertility. So mindfulness is at the heart of Buddhist psychology. Buddhist psychology shows us how we get stuck and how we break free, and it's based on a lot of things, but one is the three truths of reality. So what the Buddha says is that the first truth is life has inevitable suffering, but we resist that. We want to, we want what we want. We don't want what we don't want. And so mindfulness allows us to look at how we're resisting, and how we're judging ourselves and our experience, because the central quality is acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean endorsing or condoning what's happening. It's about being with what's happening. And so rather than trying to, and this is the inside out approach, rather than trying to change the situation, in this case, infertility, it's for the IVF to work, or, to get pregnant, to have a child. It's looking at how you're relating to the infertility. And it's the guilt, it's the regret, the anger, the everything. The other two, I'll just go through them really quickly, is that nothing is permanent. The only thing that's permanent is impermanence. And so mindfulness really helps you to learn how to ride on the waves of change and kind of have the mantra, all things shall pass. Because when you're experiencing infertility, it feels like it's never going to go away.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Like it's solidly here. And then the third truth is that we tend to personalize life, which is an incorrect way of,
like the universe must hate me type thing, right?
Yeah. It's like we have the experience and it's happening to what's called me minor I. And so rather than saying I am depressed, you say this is depression. And so it's this neutral perspective, which allows you to step back and then work with what's happening, not take things personally.
I love that. Don't take life personally. That's awesome.
Harder said than done, but
totally.
it's the practice that, that really helps.
That's really funny. So how does mindfulness then help with infertility? Well, first of all, what does stress then, what impact does stress have on fertility?
So what we know through at least 3 studies is that the degrees of depression and anxiety for women with a diagnosis of infertility is equal to the diagnosis for women with cancer, heart disease, and I think it's HIV, but definitely cancer and heart disease. Yeah. And we know that beyond a doubt that fertility treatment is stressful. We also know that the top reason for people dropping out of fertility treatment is not diagnosis, finances, or prognosis. It's stress. So stress can really keep you not only from continuing treatment or continuing trying, but even keep you from kind of getting in the door.
Yeah.
So there's been some studies. The stress fertility relationship is still controversial, but there was a study, a meta-analysis with 39 that looked at 39 studies. This was in 2015 of people who had gone into intervention groups. This is like psychological intervention groups versus those who had in a control group. And it not only showed decreased levels of depression and anxiety for the intervention group, but a higher success rate. In fact, it was double that of the control group. There was also an epidemiological study in 2015 that looked at women with very high stress were 40% less likely to become pregnant. And so that study in particular really talks about the need to take stress as just as important as like what we commonly know as like, it's important not to smoke, it's important not to drink. But this study in particular is really saying, take stress seriously and put that into your treatment. So it's not only,
but we all know that telling somebody to calm down is the best way to get them to calm down, right?
Right.
So
yeah,
if you
absolutely.
say simply just don't have stress, that's going to be super effective, I'm sure.
There's so much that people say that just drives everyone nuts.
Yeah, but how do we de-stress? Especially in fertility issues where you're like, this means so much to you.
Absolutely.
How can you just tell somebody this shouldn't mean this much? Chill out. You can't.
Well, see, that's why when I found mindfulness, and this is after my own experience, that it was like, this is exactly
what you should
what's
have.
needed,
Yeah.
because infertility is all about control. So it's, it's trying hard to succeed. And usually that effort success model works in, like, if you study more, you're going to do well on a test, or
Yeah, exactly.
but infertility, you have no control over the outcome. So what I was talking about, especially with that, like, first truth, you always need to look at how you're resisting life, how you're resisting, like, the suffering, how you're resisting the fact that everything does change, that you can't rely on placing all your ducks in a row, and that if you're personalizing it, this is an incorrect perception of life. And so when somebody says, just don't be so stressed out, mindfulness is not about changing. It's not about, like, not having the thoughts or feelings. It's about being with them, and so not trying to change what you're thinking, not trying to change how you're feeling, but opening up to it with this neutral perspective. Because if somebody says, you should just relax, then you're judging yourself. What's wrong with me? I created this.
Right.
I can't
Yeah.
relax. Yeah,
Yeah. Then it's all self-doubt again.
exactly. And while these, like what I was saying, the stress fertility relationship is controversial, and so it's not really saying that you're creating your infertility. It's saying that stress doesn't help.
Well, it makes sense biologically. It would not be good as a species if we were getting pregnant under duress. So if, it's a time of famine, or if a woolly mammoth is, sitting on your house, that's not the time to get pregnant. So it would biologically make sense that stress would suppress fertility.
Yeah, and we also see women getting pregnant under all sorts of horrible situations, and also when they're stressed out. So there's not,
Oh, yeah,
it's not
never mind.
really,
Theory
like,
debunked.
totally. No. What you're saying is true, but there's a possibility that what's happening is that there's a kind of a low grade chronic stressor that infertility is creating.
Hmm.
And because oftentimes infertility, really, you're in it for a while,
Oh, yeah.
and that they don't know, what's happening physiologically. Possibly there's an imbalance of the hormones, um, but that there could be suppression of fertility from the stress that's having an impact on the body.
Mm.
But you're not causing your infertility. But if you are feeling stress, take this seriously to incorporate that into your whatever treatment it is that you're having.
Awesome. So that goes into my next question. What is meant by a holistic approach to fertility treatment?
It's what I think of is it's like being a part, what's called a participatory patient, and that means that that it's not just you're being treated, like, by the doctor, but you're tuning into your own body and doing what you can for yourself.
Hmm.
So it's not just the pharmaceuticals, it's not just the surgeries, it's also the self-care.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's that three part component that creates the holistic approach.
So in your book, Fertile Path: The Guiding Journey with Mindfulness and Compassion, you refer to infertility as presenting a kind of existential paradox. What do you mean by that?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. When I was talking about the twists and turns, um, it's it's really kind of crazy what happens. So uh, something that I was talking about is that, normally effort equates with success, and it doesn't work that way with infertility. So that whole model of using control to to work actually makes you it's just more difficult, and it makes it harder and harder. What I've seen is the women who are really, really successful, like particularly in their careers, or really can struggle because control has worked wonders for them, because their effort has really been impactful.
Yeah.
But it just when you use control in a situation where there is no control, it only exacerbates it. And another one is that couples need more of each other when they have less to give to each other. Um, there's a race against the biological clock. And this is really common, 30, what they say is at 35, fertility starts kind of dipping. At 40, there's this dive. And everybody sort of, so many people that I work with say that they're old because they're 40, or 41. At my age, I consider they're kids.
That's so cute.
But this is a time where they actually need to slow down, but it's this race for time.
Yeah, and we're having people have babies later and later. So
yeah, absolutely. Right.
It's even more of a race.
Yeah. It's a big race. Another one is that this is a time to get more support because you're struggling. And the more support you need, the greater the kind of tendency to retreat, because you're protecting yourself from comments like, just relax.
Mm-hmm. If you just relax, or the stories of, oh, well, I stopped, I gave up, and the next month I was pregnant. So you should do the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Just adopt, go on vacation. Yeah. So, and then, having no control over when somebody gets pregnant, and, going into the office one day and, oh, guess who's pregnant, or it comes on, Facebook
triggering.
or and so there's this retreat of just like protecting yourself from who knows what's going to happen that day. There's just these counteracting tendencies. And the literature does say that those who need therapy the most are the least inclined to get it in terms of infertility. And I have definitely noticed incredible resistance around seeking support in the form of counseling.
Why do you think that is? Seems like it's a vicious cycle then, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then another vicious cycle is kind of the more stress you feel, the harder it could become to conceive. And I think that at the basis of it is what we talked about, what you're asking, about at the very beginning of this interview, that it just hurts us at our soul, or at our our fundamental sense of self. So it's scary, if you go into counseling. And I mean, I've done groups actually for more than 20 years at this point. I used to specialize in the area of drug and alcohol, and that's a resistant population. And I could tell you it was easier to get people to sign up for a group program than it has been for me to enlist women in these fertility groups.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think
is that because there's so much shame around it?
I think it's the shame. And also, like, if you open up Pandora's box, what are you going to find? And so then you start fearing that it's going to be even more overwhelming than it is. I could barely take the fertility treatment. There's no way that I could take on, kind of working on myself and getting further in touch with my emotions. So I think it's the shame, it's the overwhelm, it's the fear.
Yeah. Wow. Again, vicious cycle. But there is truth to when I mean, we hear these stories all the time about the adoptions happening, and then the next month you find out you're pregnant. and all of these things that just reinforce what you're saying is we really don't have control.
Yeah, what I've heard about those stories of, all of a sudden, adopt and then the next month, is those stories get your attention.
Yeah.
So they're it seems like they're happening more than they are. Although there was a study that came out of Israel quite a while ago, and it looked at letting go, or in mindfulness, letting go is really letting be. And it had a correlation between those women who were able to kind of be higher on the letting go scale than others. And so mindfulness is all about like letting go, or being with what's happening, letting go, letting be. And again, acceptance is not this endorsement, it's about being with. So not trying to change what's happening, but changing how you're relating to it.
Got it. Okay. So I want to talk about some practical application. So
Okay.
you have a woman in your office suffering some pretty severe postpartum or infertility struggles. We'll deal with the postpartum later. She's been trying for several years. What then would you start? First step would you teach her?
First step
Yep.
is acknowledgement, acknowledging that her feelings are valid. Absolutely first step.
So listening to her vent for an hour and saying, yes, yes, yes.
And exactly. And this is normal.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people think that they're overreacting, and oftentimes
I hate the word overreacting.
Yeah. And that's also tied into like the shame and the guilt and like, oh, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And but like I was quoting in these studies, I mean, the levels of depression and anxiety are as much as heart disease and cancer.
Yeah,
So,
it's bad.
And it is HIV. I was just remembering.
Yeah.
So number one is acknowledge.
Okay, so she's sitting in your office and she feels heard. Okay, now she's butter in your hand. She's ready to listen. she feels heard. Now what do you tell her?
Well, then it's usually, I don't want to feel this way. And what comes with this is oftentimes this regret that they didn't, like, women didn't try sooner, or they didn't go into treatment sooner. But it's regret in their decisions, in the past. So it's again kind of listening to that and normalizing that. So where mindfulness comes in is this thinking that you start getting in your own way of the suffering by these layers of guilt and regret and all that.
Start getting in your own way.
Yeah. You get in your own way.
So that the suffering, it's almost like you're getting in your way, so the suffering just can't do its job. Like, not that it's fun to suffer, but suffering serves a purpose. You can't avoid it.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
And you can't avoid it, and it's real suffering.
Yeah,
I mean, you're not making up the suffering.
No.
But what you are doing in terms of getting in the way is you're making it worse. You're making it harder for yourself.
Okay, way to layer on the guilt again. Just kidding.
Right. There's a story that I think I love to tell. It's Buddha and the three arrows. It's a very common story. So Buddha says to his students, "What happens when you're shot by an arrow?" And they say, "Oh, that's terrible. What about a second arrow?" And Buddha, the students say, "Oh, that's even worse. Well, how about the third arrow?" "Oh, well, absolutely. That just beyond horrible." And the Buddha says the first arrow is like the unavoidable suffering, but the second arrow is, why didn't I why didn't I move?
Oh my goodness.
The third arrow is I'm never going to be able to support my family. The fourth arrow, you can keep on going.
Oh my gosh. Ouch. Okay. That proves yep. Okay. Then that parable takes away the guilt as well, because if I'm causing those second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth arrows, then that means that is something I can control. I can't control the first arrow.
Exactly. Right. It's knowing, and that's like the serenity prayer. It's knowing what you can control, what you can't control, and having the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah, that serenity prayer bugs me. Just kidding. I like to have all the control over everything.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so now she's in a place where she sees that she didn't cause the first arrow, she didn't cause the infertility acceptance.
Right.
She is making herself miserable with the second, third, and fourth arrow. Okay, so she's come to the place of acceptance. Then what do you tell her?
Well, I don't know if it's that soon with coming to the place.
I like to simplify things.
But it's so at the beginning, it is a lot of listening. It's if there's the regret,
mm-hmm.
then it's looking at the regret and kind of poking holes in it. There's a lot of erroneous thinking, like, if only I had a crystal ball, but there is no crystal ball of what's going to happen. It's a kind of a black and white thinking, or way of feeling like you have more control than you have. So, so there is this also in mindfulness. It's only until you accept yourself for who you are can you change. So it's not trying to change. Again, it's not the situation. It's finding that place of acceptance within yourself. So I like in the book, which is based on this program that I put together. It has these steps, and in fact, each chapter represents one week of the program.
Nice.
So the first practice is learning how to use the breath to turn on the relaxation response. Because what happens with infertility is, because it's a chronic stress condition, is that we tend to breathe from our chest. It's shallow breathing, and this is where the stress response comes from. And we need the stress response to, like, run away from the saber-toothed tiger. But there's so many stressful situations in each day, starting with the sound of the alarm clock. But then there's the chronic stress of infertility, that this stress response stays on, but it's at kind of a low alert. And the antidote to the stress response is the relaxation response, and it's bringing the breath into the belly so that the belly expands on the inhalation and contracts on the exhalation. And so I teach abdominal breathing. You could do that at home, best if you're lying down. Put one hand on your chest, put one hand on your belly, and see what hand is raising more. And so it's being able to just kind of follow the breath and invite the breath to go really where it wants to go, because this is how we naturally breathe. So the informal practice of the first step is to put like breath reminders, and I give people these little pieces of felt that's shaped like a heart. And it's the acronym FELT, because it's made out of felt. Feel every loving touch. So you put these felt pieces in different places as reminders to breathe from your belly. And so that, that's like a brake pedal. It cools down the nervous system, where the stress response, the chest breathing, is like putting your foot on the gas. So that's step number one. Step number two, and I follow the kind of traditional practices of mindfulness, how you learn how to do mindfulness meditation. It's then learning how to work with the breath. And so the breath is the bridge that connects the mind and the body. And so, we can be driving down the freeway and skip the turnoff, because our mind is like 2,000 miles away. And oftentimes during the day, we're somewhere other than where we actually are.
Yeah.
And so meditation on the breath is learning how to put your attention on the breath. And you're not trying to do abdominal breathing, but actually it happens on its own. The breath is the anchor that anchors you to the present moment. And the problem with infertility is that it's past and future based. The regret, the guilt of the past, the fear, the anticipation of the future. And mindfulness is all about present moment awareness. And so anchoring to the breath through meditation on the breath, and it can even be a 2 to 3 minute practice. But like on my website, I have all of the practices, and they're 10-minute practices. So then I teach the second practice, which is mindfulness of the body. So mindfulness is considered an embodied practice because it's how the body responds to our thoughts, emotions, and experiences. The problem with our thoughts is that they create stories, and the stories aren't true, and they send us down a rabbit hole. And the body is a reliable source of information. The body doesn't lie like our thoughts do. And so the practice that goes with mindfulness of the body, there's the informal and then the formal practice. The informal one is the pause practice. So that practice is, you're in a tense situation, you're noticing that you're feeling tense, and you pause, and then you breathe, because again, it's calming down the nervous system. And then you look at your thoughts. You observe. So you observe, what are you thinking? I'm never going to get pregnant. And you don't do anything with it. You just observe. That's the thought. What's the emotion? Anxiety.
Yeah. Then you
Again,
start feeling
don't
in your
do
body.
anything with it. And then you go into your body. And you can, see where you're holding the tension in your body, kind of, if it's in your heart area, kind of breathe into and out from your heart, kind of open it up. You move your shoulders. So this is a practice that you could even do when you're driving in the car. You could have your eyes open.
Yeah.
Just bring yourself into your body. So the body grounds yourself. And then the formal practice is meditation on the body, where you learn to actually, what I was saying about acceptance is the ability to turn toward that which you resist. And the problem with stress is that we don't want to feel that way, and so we run or hide, or we're feeling overwhelmed by it. But what happens with mindfulness is that and this is the first practice that really teaches it extremely well, that you go to precisely where you're feeling the tension, and you acknowledge what's there with mindfulness, meaning without judging it. That I shouldn't be feeling this way, that I don't like this. And then you breathe into and out from that source of discomfort, creating room for those sensations to dissipate or fall into the past, or simply be, because acknowledgement alone is a powerful tool in discharging tension. That goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. The most important thing is acknowledge. Do you want me to talk about the next two?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to be too wordy
no,
here.
I'm just thinking how, mindfulness, the act of being mindful is the non-judgment. So you say, be mindful, be mindful. It sounds a lot nicer than stop being judgmental, stop being judgmental.
You're right. It's not about stopping. It's mindfulness is all about witnessing, noticing, observing.
Yeah. And when I say judgmental, I mean of yourself. Like when you say,
exactly, right.
Go inside and figure out and feel where your body's holding that. It could be anger, in your liver. It could be resentment in your heart, like wherever you're holding that,
Mm-hmm.
that emotion, that anxiety, you know.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I love that. And
Yeah.
not being judgmental of it. Like, what did your liver ever do to like sin against you? I mean,
Yeah.
your body doesn't do that, but it holds the emotions for you. And if you just are mindful of your body, then that's like most of the battle, isn't it?
Yeah. It's what happens, and this is what I was saying about you getting your own way. It's the thoughts are really corrosive, and mindfulness is an embodied practice, gets you out of your head, and you start with your body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this neutral attention, and then there's control as a way that we typically kind of deal with life, which is what I was saying doesn't work, especially with infertility. And then mindfulness uses awareness. It's more than like a technique. It's really a way of life. So it's just being aware of what's happening, what you're feeling, what you're thinking, observing it, and then working with it with mindful attention, not meaning without judging it, without being, without avoiding it,
Mm-hmm.
without being consumed by it. It's just being with it neutrally.
Yeah.
So the next practice after anchoring with learning how to anchor with the breath, learning how to ground with the body, is learning how to work with thoughts. And as I was saying, we tend to have this categorization model of liking, disliking, success, failure, and so we have these thoughts that are usually like, it's usually a personalizing kind of thought, like I'm a failure because I can't get pregnant. And then there's the emotion, which is the guilt or the anxiety, and that it's like it confirms the thought. It makes it that much more real. And so mindfulness, Buddhist psychology, comes from the perspective that it's not so much the thoughts we have, but how tightly we hold on to those thoughts that accounts for our mental suffering.
Well, it's like the arrow parable. You are not in control of the first thought that comes to your head, but you're in control of the second, third, and fourth thought.
Yeah. And how tightly, like if that second thought is, oh my gosh, why didn't I get away? But we hold on to it so tightly, then that's much more the problem than the thought itself.
Yeah.
There's another really, really cool story that is often told in mindfulness circles, and it's a story about the monkey and the coconut. So the way that monkeys are caught, have been caught in some cultures,
Yeah.
is to put a banana, you cut a hole, drill a hole in the coconut, and you take out the milk, put a banana inside, hang it from a tree. And so the monkey comes over, puts his hand in the hole, and grabs a hold of the banana, but can't get the hand out because the fist is too big.
Yep.
And so the hunter just comes around and gets the monkey easily.
Because it won't let go of the banana.
It won't let go. And so this is the story that goes with, it's how tightly we hold on to things. That's the problem.
Wow.
So then it's learning how to see thoughts skillfully. One, that they're mental formations, that that they're not, they're to be observed. Like clouds in the sky, forming and then passing away, and they're events. They're not facts. So it's not their thoughts are not to be personalized. They're seen as just events that come and go, and so then it's being able to take this kind of neutral perspective and really look into the thought. And as I was saying, Buddhist psychology is all about what keeps you stuck and how to break free.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's I do a lot of work with thoughts in therapy, because the thoughts are all invalid, but they feel so real.
Yeah.
So it's working with thoughts skillfully and kind of reframing them in a way that's accurate and that can produce feelings of well-being. And then lastly, it's how to work with your emotions. And
Yeah.
like thoughts, emotions are not seen as good or bad, right or wrong, but they have the potential to become destructive if they're resisted.
Yeah.
So again, resistance comes in the form of judging, obsessing, avoiding, discounting. And so with emotions, it's about making room for emotions. It's using the quality of openness.
Mm-hmm.
There's a story that goes with that that I love. So what happens if you put a teaspoon of salt in a cup and taste it? It's really salty. How about a pot? The same a teaspoon of salt. It's less salty, but a teaspoon of salt in a pond, you don't taste the salt. And so it's the analogy of disturbance of the mind uh, dissolves in a spacious mind and an open heart.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So it's when you feel an emotion. I do this all the time because I'm actually I feel a lot of emotions. That's who I am. That's not going to go away. But it's getting out of my head by going into my body and literally just making room for the emotion, because it's constricting of the emotion. This is the tightness
Yeah.
that only exacerbates the emotion. So it's breathing into the emotion, just creating space for it in the body. And certainly there's meditation on emotions that teaches you how to work with emotions. There's meditation on thoughts, again, meditation on body, and meditation on breath. So there's the formal practices that go with each and the informal practices that go with each.
So this all applies mostly to the woman herself, right? We've been talking about the mindfulness, but what impact does infertility have on her partner?
Yeah, so I have not only done these 8-week programs, but I also have a 1-day program, and I divide. One of the things that we do is I have a men's group and a women's group, and I say, how has infertility impacted your relationship? So what are the challenges, and what have you found that that helps? And typically women think that their men just aren't feeling the pain of infertility
Yeah.
anywhere near as deeply as they are.
Mm-hmm.
It is very painful for men, but they express it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Men under conditions where self-esteem is being threatened, which infertility does, there's kind of typical male and female reactions. Now, this isn't always the case, but the stereotype is that men tend to fix, and women tend to feel, and feel overwhelmed, run over by their emotions, and the fixing tends to constrict the emotions. So they're looking for answers and a way for it to help, but for women it feels like they're not really there.
Yeah.
They feel like they're between a rock and a hard space, that if they say how they feel, then it's gonna overwhelm their partner. And if they try this advice, that's not going to help. If they whatever they try doesn't seem to be right, so they feel pretty inadequate. I mean, that's what I've found. And so typically infertility tends to drive a wedge in the relationship.
Yeah, it's really difficult. So how do you,
until it's worked with, and then it can bring you closer together.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness, yes. So how do you then help people find acceptance and ease into the process of perhaps a third party fertility solution, like surrogacy, adoption?
Yeah. So one of the things that happens with mindfulness, since it is this neutral attention and uh, uh, getting to a place of really looking at your thoughts and what's valid and what's not valid, is that you look at, what is your intention, what is your deep motivation, why do you want to have a child? eh, so many people start questioning, if they actually do want a child, because it's so hard. Um, and so um, oftentimes it feels like it's all about the genetics. And when you get through a lot of these practices, then you realize that it's not the genetics that's important. It's really the parenting.
Mm.
It's the transaction of love. And if I fell in love, like with my husband, who's I never knew, or I've heard this said a lot, I totally love my dog, and this is like a different species.
Yeah,
Then it's
that
like,
is a good comparison. How could you
yeah,
think, yeah, you could love your partner but
you,
not love a child that's biologically not yours? That's
exactly right. So you really start digging into the validity and recognizing what is really truly important, what's trying to happen here, and it is that transaction of love.
what's trying to happen here. I love it. Wow. My goodness. And you went through that journey too. How long did you decide, what was your thought process when you finally decided to go with surrogacy?
Yeah. So I had lost several pregnancies, and then an IVF didn't work, and the only other option was donor IVF. And I was actually in the original pool, kind of when it started.
I was gonna say, I'm doing the math here and I'm like, wow, that's IVF. You're in the 90s.
Right, because my daughter is actually 26,
This was
and so
1994.
donor IVF was almost like 30 years 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. It's brand new.
Yeah. So, I mean, when my OBGYN called me, I was at work, and said the only thing that would work is donor IVF. I had no clue what she was talking about. Um, and so um, it was really hard for me to let go of my genetics, because I'm 100% Italian, and really just raised in this total Italian way, Italian identity. I have this big nose, and I actually appreciate the big nose, because it's an Italian kind of relic. Um, and it was so hard to let go of the genetics. And then finally, when I started kind of pursuing the path of donor egg, we first, it was my sister, and then we were matched with a donor. And in those days, there were no agencies, and so you could give one criterion to the nurses of how you wanted to be matched. And we looked at it, and we thought, actually, it's curiosity, and it's sort of an open an openness, and kind of way of being. And curiosity actually is fundamental in mindfulness. And so we met the donor, because in those days, 50% of intended parents wanted to meet the donor, and 50% of donors wanted to meet the intended parents. And so when I went down to LA, because I was at University of Southern California, I actually stayed with my donor, and we became good friends, because we had like 3 fresh cycles, and there were a couple of like frozen transfers.
Oh my goodness. So she's
And
your egg donor.
she was my egg donor.
Got it.
Yeah, she was like my egg donor, and uh, it didn't matter that she had blonde hair. She looked nothing like me. The only similarity was that she was 5'2" and I'm 5'2". But it was that she was such a wonderful person, and it was a child coming out of like somebody wanting to be there to help us. So it didn't work. And so we pursued adoption and surrogacy simultaneously and said wherever the baby came first. And we were just about ready to adopt a baby, and it fell through. And then we were matched with our surrogate. And in those days, it was traditional surrogacy.
Yeah,
So
that
it
was my
wasn't,
next question.
yeah, it wasn't my egg. Donor egg was not successful enough to use it for surrogacy. So it was my husband's sperm using IUIs for inseminations. So I actually had to do a step-parent adoption to have my child. So it was and again, this doesn't
This is
happen now.
1990. Well, so I think some states you can still do.
1996.
Yeah, you can still do traditional surrogacy is where the surrogate is also the egg donor, and that's illegal
And that's what
in
it
most.
is.
It's most states that's illegal now.
Well, it's not. It's
Not illegal.
It's certainly not recommended.
Not recommended.
Yeah, and if you go to a lot of agencies, they won't. They'll.
Well, then you get in the problem if the surrogate changes her mind. It is her egg. It is her offspring. So you get there's a little bit of a problem there.
Exactly right. But like in California, there's case law which basically it goes in favor of the contract. So even with traditional surrogacy,
but who wants to break someone's mind? So it's easier to avoid those situations.
Exactly, and I never recommend traditional surrogacy to anyone. Yeah.
So, but you met your traditional surrogate, obviously, and
because in surrogacy, like you for most people in the United States, you do.
Yeah.
And it was a hard experience. It was very bittersweet because it's hard seeing someone do something that you want to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the first book that I know of that came out on surrogacy was called A Matter of Trust. And it really is about building trust. And so it turned out to be a really wonderful experience. We were there for the birth, and just the handing over of the baby, Cheyenne, to me was the most, one of the most like amazing moments. That someone who previously never knew you is willing to give you this gift of life.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I know, it's amazing. It's unbelievable. Wow, I could talk to you all day. Honestly, we should probably do another episode on fertility. This is fascinating. But for listeners, where would they find your website or more about your book?
So the book is on Amazon. Either look up my name, Janetti Marotta, or A Fertile Path. You could also go to my website, which is janettimarotta.com, and you can just click the button, purchase the book. And I've got a lot of like posts on there. Again, you can access the meditations that are in the book, so that all of the meditations are guided meditations, and you can access that for free even if you don't buy the book.
I see that. I'm on your beautiful website, and you can download these great things. Very cool. Cool. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions for Dr. Marotta, you can contact her through her site, or you can also contact me at media@birthcircle.com. And again, it's Janetti Marotta, and I'm going to spell it just because.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of tricky.
Yeah, JANETTIMAROTTA. Or you can look at the show notes. We'll have it linked. Thank you so much, Dr. Marotta. This has been so fascinating.
Thank you, Sarah. What a treat to be on your show, and it's wonderful that you have this show. I listened to a few podcasts, and they're fantastic. And you are a terrific interviewer.
Oh, thank you.
You are, yeah. I mean, you just make it so like real.
It's a conversation, learning from the best.
Conversation.
Yep, I feel so honored that I get to kneel at the feet of the masters from all over the world and learn from your wisdom. So thank you so much.
I don't call myself a master, but anyway, thank you for the compliment.
You're obviously a master.
Okay, thank you.
Please visit us at birthcircle.com, join our Facebook groups, or find us on Instagram and Pinterest. We hope you'll use our resources to support your birthing experience.